Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the summer quarterly community meeting for the Northern Bus Garage Reconstruction Project. Next slide, please. We have individuals participating both in person and online. So for you all in the room, we ask that you please hold your questions until the Q&A period. Simply raise your hand. We'll bring a mic to you. We expect a lot of questions. We have several individuals who are online as well as in person. So, we're going to try to make sure everyone has an opportunity to get their questions asked and answered. We will be going back and forth between online and in person. For those of you, next slide, who are on the virtual through the Zoom, feel free to raise your hand. If you look at the bottom in the reactions, it has a raise hand button. There's also, you can type in the comment section that you have a question, and we will take you off mute so you can ask it directly. Or you can type your question directly into the chat, and someone in the room will read it and get an answer. So in person, simply raise your hand. We'll bring a mic to you to ask the question. Online, you can type the question into the chat, use the raise hand function, or type in, "I have a question," and we'll be able to get those answered. As you know, this evening there have been a lot of conversations in the community. Just want to acknowledge that we do have representatives throughout from DDOT as well as from WMATA to talk about the other issues around parking. So we will allot time at the end of the first section for that. We are constrained in our time for the meeting for this room. And it was between delaying the meeting, which we did not want to do, or sticking with the space. So just signaling, if we're unable to get to the environmental management update, we will make sure that that information is shared. And we may quickly go through what's to expect next. You can always email and the team, and we'll make sure questions get answered if none are not answered today. So the meeting agenda is we'll do introductions momentarily. We'll go through the project overview and updates, which will include the street limitations and the water utility. If we get to it, we'll do the environmental management update, and then we'll talk about the rest of the year and what to expect, including the fall and winter meeting and when they'll be happening, as well as the rest of the project. Next slide. So with that, I will turn it over to Maya to do introductions. Good evening, Maya.
Good evening. Thank you, Denzel. And good evening again, Northern community members in the room and online. Thank you for joining, for the opportunity to bring you the latest update from our exciting project, Northern Bus Garage Reconstruction Project. For the new members, my name is Maya Nino, and I'm the Senior Program Manager with WMATA's Project Delivery Office. With me today, to my right, we have Mr. Tom Robinson. He is the Project Manager with the CM. To his right, we also have Mr. John Munson. He is a Contractor Executive Project Manager. And to his right, we have Mr. Jim Ash, WMATA's Environmental Coordinator. As Mr. Denzel said, we do have also representation from DDOT in the room. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Munson for project overview and updates.
Thank you, Maya. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to start with a quick update of the activities happening on site. Since we last met, the big push has been on completing cast-in-place concrete work necessary to start the steel erection. So from the footing and pile cap perspective, we're at about 90% complete as of this meeting. Our foundation walls are at 80% complete, and our slab on grade placement is about 25% complete. You can see some of this work in the two pictures. The top right is a picture of the foundation walls being cast up against the historic facade along the 14th Street side of the job. And then in the bottom right, you can see a picture of one of our slab on grade placements happening along the Arkansas Avenue side of the job. To support the foundation wall operation, we're also working on low-grade waterproofing, so that's progressing part and parcel with the foundation wall placement, so that is also at 80% complete. Next slide, please. Also, to support the cast-in-place concrete work is our underground plumbing and electrical work. So both the piping and conduit installation is ongoing to support that slab on grade placement I just spoke about. So you can see that in the top right photo with some of the piping going in there. And from a wet utility perspective, We completed the storm pipe installation on Buchanan Street and then shifted onto 14th Street for the sewer line installation. You can see a picture of some of that happening in the bottom right, and I'm going to speak a little bit more about that in a subsequent slide. Next slide, please. And then lastly, from a progress perspective, as I talked about, our big push was getting ready to start structural steel. We did start that ahead of schedule on the 22nd of July, and we're expecting about a 12-month duration overall for that operation. Just some quick facts about that. In total, we've got about 9,500 tons of steel that we're going to be placing on the job, so it's a very steel-heavy project, and that is comprised in total of just over 3,800 individual pieces of steel. And in the two photos there, you can see that operation taking place there. We started in the northeast corner of the job in the intersection of Arkansas and Iowa Avenues there. Next slide, please. From a site maintenance perspective, we're doing the same things that I've talked about the past several meetings as far as taking care of dust and doing the street sweeping and the things we've talked about. The big thing to highlight is with excavation complete at this point, we are continuing to cover up the footprint of the site with concrete as well as gravel for the drainage layer underneath the slab. So we have less and less dirt throughout the site, so that's obviously a good thing to help continue to mitigate the challenges with dust. But obviously, while there is still any challenges, we're continuing to address that through the measures I've talked about in the past. Next slide, please. Next, just looking ahead to our outlook for the next quarter. So again, our focus was completing slab on grade on the east side to be able to start structural steel. So with steel now started, we're going to jump over to the west side and start placing slab on grade on that side. The underground plumbing and electrical work will continue to support that. The sewer line installation will be completed along 14th Street to be able to start then the next operation with the water line installation, which I'll also talk about. Structural steel will continue. As I mentioned, that's a very long operation, so that'll continue for several more updates here. And then as the steel gets a little bit further ahead, we will start placing metal deck and starting placement of the elevated slabs for the upper levels of the building. And then lastly, just a quick update on the electric bus side of things. WMATA has approved our 75% design package, so our team is now proceeding towards the 90% documents. So we continue to work with WMATA on progressing that work and the ability to start to procure the long lead electrical equipment that will be necessary to support the bus charging. Next slide. All right, so next I'm going to talk a little bit more about the sewer line installation. So last quarter, I had given an update on the start of this work. So some of this is information from last time, but what I wanted to do is really focus on where we're at and some of the concerns that have been raised. So the first two phases that started inside our fence line and then extended the sewer line out into 14th Street are complete. So those were complete prior to this meeting. And that allowed us to start the primary phase, which is what's pictured in the top right, which is what you see out there today. That started right towards the end of July. So as I mentioned last quarter, we're expecting an 8-week duration for this operation. So right now that would put us in week 3 of that work. Our work hours, so what we did with this operation is we do have the concrete barriers, as I highlighted last time, and that was done to help not only with worker safety and make sure that the crews could work in that area with traffic going by on both sides and make sure that the workers are protected, but it also allows us to work longer hours to make sure that we can try to limit our duration in the street and get out of there, because we understood that this would be impactful with the parking. So again, we're about 3 weeks into this operation. We're working from Monday to Friday, typically from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., so longer hours than normal. And we've now started working Saturdays as well, based on some of the concerns that we heard raised. So we worked last Saturday, which was helping make up for some of the days we lost with the hurricane that came through towards the tail end. We will be working this Saturday as well, and we'll continue to plan on doing so through the completion of the work. I'd also talked about last time how the barriers would remain in place for the duration of the operation. One thing that we looked at as part of the concerns raised is what we could do to try to help with that. So I've put another graphic here in the bottom right that wasn't there last time. So what we're doing and what we're coordinating with DC Water on is a little bit of a change to our original sequence of work. Is We recently placed the manhole that is about mid-block between Crittenden and Decatur. And with that in, what we're going to do is, instead of testing the entire line at once, we are going to do an interim stage of testing, which we're planning to complete this coming Monday. So if that goes well, then our crews will work to patch the section of asphalt where we've already installed the line, and then we will remove a portion of the barriers back towards that manhole so that we can reduce the length of our work zone and try to open up as much parking as possible. So that will basically mean we'll be pulling back. As you can see, right now we're extending past the intersection of Crittenden. We're going to be pulling back to the north side of the intersection there with the limits of our work zone. Not on this page, but we can certainly share something after this meeting that would be larger. Yeah, I apologize for that. So we can definitely send something larger, but so that is something that we are actively working on, and like I said, the testing will be taking place next week, so that hopefully we can work on reducing the length of this work zone. And then once that's done, we'll continue with the remainder, as I said, and then ultimately, once that's done, we'll be able to pull the remainder of the barriers and switch to the remaining phases, which I talked about last time, which is the last phases is basically, again, crossing 14th Street to tie in existing storm structures along the curb line there. So that work, as I talked about last time, will not be in concrete barriers. That will be done just with cones and barrels, only during non-peak hours, that 9:30 to 3:30 window. So it'll be a shorter operation overall, and also shorter work hours. And at the end of each shift, all the cones and barrels will come out of the street. But when we do that work, there will be some traffic shifts involved, which will be very similar to what you saw when we were doing the tie-ins at the Crittenden side of the job. Next slide, please. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, the other concern that we saw from our side, and what we also heard from the community, was regarding some of the other impacts from adjacent operations. We had the same concern the second that we saw this other contractor show up from the DC plug project. We recognized there was potential safety concerns and obviously greater impacts to the community, so we immediately started our outreach there with the DDOT contractor, and then ultimately we're able to get in contact with the appropriate folks at DDOT. So we've met a couple of times now, and based on that coordination, they agreed to demobilize their operation while we complete our work. So that has been done. So they are now working in other parts of the city, and will come back later. So right now we are going to continue completing our work on the sewer line. And then when that is done, as I mentioned, we have to do a water main replacement. That work will occur in the parking lane on the east side of 14th Street. So the impacts there will be limited to the parking lane on the east side, which is the side abutting our project, and the bike lane, which will become a shared use lane with the travel lane there during that operation. But the two travel lanes will not be impacted, nor will the parking on the west side of 14th Street during that work. And we also plan to break that work into 2 phases so that we're not affecting parking the full length of our job site. So we're going to break it up to try to, again, limit how long the parking's closed for the 2 phases that we break that into. So again, then once all of that work is complete, only then will the DDOT contractor working on the plug project come back to the site. And as Maya mentioned, we have some individuals from DDOT here to help answer any other questions related to their work or any other questions related to the permitting process. And with that, I think that concludes the construction update, so I'll turn it back over to Donzel to start the Q&A.
Thank you. And Mr. Mons, I appreciate that feedback. What we'll do is we'll put in the chat immediately the link to the site for people, we can look at the slides on your own, and we'll make sure, especially if we have your email, that we can email everyone the link, or we can write it down if you want to copy it, so that everyone can, outside of the meeting, be able to look at these slides. And they are on the project website. If you go on the project website, resources, meetings, they're within that tab, and you can see the slides there as well. But thank you for that. So any questions, and thank you, DDOT, for coming to the table so you can answer questions directly. Questions regarding project update, construction update, or parking? Do we have any on, just want to check online real quick?
So online, we have one comment from Jose Rios, the manager at Sondo. Just recapping the challenges that are being faced by the road closure between Crittenden and Decatur. He's open to discussing different ways that he can work with the team to limit the impact. And it would also help if you could cover some of the, if you could cover some direct financial compensation for the revenue that they've lost. But they appreciate your time and look forward to working together to find a solution.
Okay. Don't know if we can get an answer to the compensation piece in this meeting, but I do acknowledge, that is a question that needs an answer. So we will look to identify where does that need to be addressed, similar to the way we identified DDOT. I saw a hand raised. I know Ms. Wands is pointing to Mr. Upta, and then I see a couple of other hands. So I'm going to start here in the black. Did you have your hand up? We have a mic. And the reason we're asking you to use the mic, just so that people online can hear the question as well.
Thank you. So my name is Lauren Coles. I'm speaking on behalf of Highlands Cafe and Restaurant. The business has been in establishment since 2008. So, that just paints a broader picture of the perspective of the development that's now being enmeshed into people's neighborhoods and residential areas. To piggyback upon the impact that it's had from a very close view. We have elderly pedestrians that are used to parking freely. We have children with disabilities. We have the general public, a variety of people who commute in various different ways, from Uber, people who work within the restaurant, like myself. A lot of people are having a difficult time. Even the deliveries, you all spoke about some of your contractors having issues. And then due to the longevity of the project, and we talk about steel, things like that, I am now pretty concerned about just the safety and the implications of having such a big project like that, with the pedestrians being so vulnerable. We have patio space, things like that. So I could go on and on, but I'll pass the mic. But the compensation piece, due to how fragile this project is right now, I think is really something that is being considered by a lot of business owners, clearly. And the revenue drop has been pretty significant from a day-to-day basis, about $1,500, if not more. And if it continues, potentially more on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we have from Highlands.
Thanks. So it's two parts, and I want to make sure that we can respond. So, in addition to the compensation, it sounds like you were looking for, have they considered, the safety and the individuals who visit, accessibility for everyone who's in the community, so from elderly, children, those with special needs.
Bikers.
Right. And so you're listening for,
People
what
getting off
considerations.
at the bus stop. The bus
Right.
stop's right there with
Right.
the Ubers, with the traffic lane.
Right. So what considerations have been
No
made?
signage really either. We do have hearing and vision impaired people.
Appreciate it. So what's consideration been made for pedestrians, whatever their needs may be, and also what are steps are being taken to ensure the safety around the construction site itself, considering the steel, right?
And the parking.
Right, and the park.
And so many levels.
So I think, John, if you can talk about the protection around the site, and then we can talk about the parking piece.
Yeah, thank you. So from our perspective, again, we appreciate the impact, and we've heard the concerns raised, and that's why we're trying to do everything we can to shorten our operation. So we don't take it lightly, and we want to be good partners with the community. So we are doing everything we can to try to shorten it. I understand that that is not a perfect solution, and our goal is to get out of your hair as fast as possible. We, obviously worked with DDOT to put a plan in place that meets their standards, both from a worker protection perspective and those around us in terms of the signage that's up and everything else. If there are more specific concerns, I think that's something that potentially we have some folks from DDOT here. We may be able to understand what potential options they have in terms of what they're able to do from their perspective.
Oh, I'm coming to Ms. Wanda, I promise. Did you want to?
Yeah, Ian Maggard, Senior Advisor to the Director of DDOT. So yeah, we've been working with WMATA and other parties that have been working on site. Once we learned about the parking constraints that the businesses were having and also residents, we immediately demobilized our DC plug project right there, and then we met with all parties that are doing work in that area. And so what the DC plug demobilization does is actually opens up 2 blocks of parking, and basically it allows us to stagger all of our projects along this corridor so that there's not like a massive impact all at once. We all still have to do our work, obviously, and I mean, we are very understanding of like the pressures that the parking is causing, and that's really why we wanted to open this up as fast as possible. Olu, do you want to talk briefly a little bit about how DC Plug, once they do move in, we're trying to reduce our work zone and do that in segments so that, again, the work zone is reduced, less parking is taken at one time, and then folks can get to your business. I've been to Midland's many birthday parties, so yeah.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, we know that every time we go into neighborhoods, there are always problems with parking. So we do everything we can to make sure we do not have parking issue. Thank you for alerting us in this situation. Like Ian said, the moment we heard about it, we told our contractor to demobilize and move to the other part of the situation. And right now, we are not coming back until WMATA releases that segment of 14th Street for us. And when we do come back this time, we will make sure that we are not occupying the whole road. We will make sure that at least only one side of the road is being worked, the other side is left so that people can park their vehicles. We want residents to be able to come to their homes safely, and we want, there's a law called safe passage. We are not above the law. So it means at every construction, all road users must be able to use this road safely, and that we do at a higher too. Thank you.
So thank you, Olu, and thank you, Ian. I can tell you, you're going to need to get a little more specific before the end of this meeting. I'm going to give you a breather. I'm going to let another question, but I'm just, and I know we have some key questions. Just understanding the community, I'm just preparing you. They're going to want to know, and that's why I asked them to bring this slide up, just so you can hear it. And I know you can't see it well, but they're going to, as you know from the letters that were sent, what can be done is part of the questions that you're going to hear. So I don't want to, I know you had your hand up, and then we'll come here, and I see you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Prather. I'm a deacon and the chair of the Board of Christian Ed at People's Congregational United Church of Christ. And we see the building going up. Some of our members are concerned. We have a youth garden in the back of some of our property, and some of the members are concerned about whether there are possible hazardous materials or waste coming from the bus barn. So my question is, did you have any hazardous waste on site or underground? And are you monitoring for that right now?
So normally I would ask you not to answer, Jim, but considering we may not get to your section, if you don't mind, just can you speak to that a little bit around the testing, or do you need your slide?
I can speak to the, it's going to take me a little bit to get through this. There are petroleum contaminated materials in the soil. There are soils that are contaminated with chlorinated solvents, dry cleaning fluid, and other materials that were used to clean engine parts. Both of those contaminants are present in the soil, and we are removing them as we identify them. I will talk more to this during my section. We are removing them, we are sampling them and characterizing them, and then sending them off-site for disposal. We're also taking some measures, implementing some measures to remediate any residual contamination that remains on site. I'll talk a little bit more during my segment. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
All right.
We had a question over here.
Good evening. If I could just get a summary of the timeline. You're in week 3 of approximately 8 weeks, and is water subsequent or included in that? And then once you finish those 2 tasks that you're on a timeline on, how soon does plug come jumping in right away? Is there going to be some gap in between? Because if plug starts day 1 when you're done, businesses are going to close. Bingo, plain and simple.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So from our perspective, yeah, as I said, we're in week 3 of 8 on the sewer line installation for the primary phase. When we complete that, as I mentioned, we still have a little bit of work on the back end to complete the tie-ins on the sewer line, but those will be, like I said, in smaller operations. So those will, as I mentioned, there's a couple other phases that vary from 1 to 3 weeks each. So those will happen, but again, during that time, the only work that will be happening is that sewer line work. When that is all complete, then in theory, that's when we would start the water line work, and we would work our way back down on that east side in the parking lane there. So again, there won't be any overlap between the sewer and water line. It'll be totally heel to toe operations. And when that is done, then in theory, then DDOT could start. As far as whether they would start right away, they would need to address that. I don't know exactly what their program looks like and their schedule.
Right, and I think to ask,
Oh, sorry, the water timeline? Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we've broken into 2 phases because the water main replacement does extend the 2-block length of the job site, so it's a little bit different than the sewer line work where it just stops at Crittenden. So our plan is to work only in 1 block at a time, with the goal for each phase to be about 6 weeks.
so,
Yes.
hold on, is it 8 and 6 or 8 and 12?
So it is 8 and 12. So I guess I want to make sure I don't misspeak. So it's 8 weeks. Then like I said, we've got a little bit of the completion tie-in work on the sewer line that will take a little bit longer. And then when that's done, we would start those 2 6-week spans for the water line.
So, John, since we're here, I want to make sure I'm clear. So this, and I know you can't see it well, so where we are, this is the street, this is the west side, this is the east side near the project. We have approximately 5 more weeks of this. Then this goes away, and then the west side is the 12 weeks.
The east side.
East
Sorry,
side,
the
sorry.
east side.
East side
So
is the-
abutting our job site, yes,
And then, but the west side is,
will not be impacted while the water line work is happening.
okay. But, and then you don't know when plug will come back. Olu, do you know once they're completed, when plug will come back?
We'll be coordinating with them as soon as they finish this, then we'll be coming back. We hope to finish our own work within 55 days.
55 days?
And for context on that, it's not the same block, it's 1 block south.
So that's 8 weeks, right? Another after that. So the question though is, I guess, is there a pause, or can there be a pause between when they say they're done before you all have to get started? I think what they're looking for, can we say we'll get 4 weeks pause, a 2-month pause, and before you all come back in? You may not be able to answer, but I'm just trying to, get to the specificity that I think the community is looking
Yeah, we will keep coordinating with the community
for. Okay,
to see when they actually want us back. I know the another wants to come back immediately, but we have told them, no, you cannot. You have to wait until they finish and when the community wants us back.
all right. Nina, I want you to sit right there. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, Mr. Oakley.
This is a mess. This project and this phase has not been thought all the way through. The only reason we're having this discussion now is because of the impact on these businesses that are here. That's the only reason we're having this discussion. If we hadn't have said anything, you all would have been moving along with this meeting as normal. When I hear somebody tell you that they're losing a day for the length of this project in 2 months, that's almost $100,000. That's a significant impact. And I'm telling you now, the concern I have is this. Let me ask this question first, and I want to ask this because I want witnesses. Is there a plan to have a separate meeting with the business and property owners in the 2 blocks of 14th Street?
We're talking now. There's a meeting.
No, this
That's
is
what
not
the
good
form-
enough. Talking now is not good enough, and it was my understanding that somewhere around a week to 10 days after this meeting, there was going to be a meeting with the business and property owners to discuss this matter. Now, if it's something that you all can handle, I've already got feelers out to the board of directors for WMATA, because somebody has to do something about this. I'm ready to hire an attorney. The only reason I don't is because I understand that at least 4 matters need to be met in order to seek an injunction against what you all are doing. But it's that one matter that I can't get around because you all are providing a public service. And you know this. But there was no consideration given to any of these business people in these 2 blocks. I know there wasn't any, because DDOT is now coming in trying to straighten some things out, but it's too late. I mean, you all are like air traffic controllers that ain't paying attention. This is not the first time that there have been multiple projects going on in this community and other communities where no parking signs are just given out willy-nilly. So here's the deal. If we're not going to have another meeting, this is a waste of time. We got to have another meeting with you all. That slide that you showed on page 13, the one that you talked about at the very bottom. So this is the first I'm hearing of this. It's 8 weeks. And how many more projects are there going to be in the 1 to 3 week phase? At that bottom, it says remaining phases require adjustments to traffic alignment at 14th and Decatur intersection during work hours only. And it says durations vary from 1 to 3 weeks. But how many 1 to 3 week periods are there going to be?
So let me try to get the question so that you can get an answer, Mr. Gupta. So one, when you say it could vary by 1 to 3 weeks, if you could talk about that a little bit, John. But I guess to DDOT, the question becomes, what is the process for issuing the permits around parking that allow for, brought the confluence of Plug and the construction site?
To be clear, we had Plug, we had WMATA, and for 10 to 12 days, we had the tennis tournament. And you all you had to do is just ask for a no parking permit, and y'all give them out like it's candy. And so this confluence is what's causing the problem. And what I'm hearing is, even when we think it's over, it's not going to be over. DC Plug is coming back. Emerson Street has been shut down for what, 3 days now? For at least another week.
So let me get the answer.
So here's my question to DDOT. Can you all speak to DPW and ask them to suspend street cleaning on Buchanan, Crittenden, and Decatur?
And that leads you to the other ask that you had, right? So I want to make sure.
Well, I got a lot of asks.
I got you, and that's why I want to start getting hopefully getting some answers. So the first one was, you're looking for more information around how the no parking permits are issued. Then the other piece is around what kind of parking relief can happen, like no street cleaning, permitting, right?
Don't worry about the permit thing, because we've been complaining about that for years. How these permits are just handed out without someone there saying
This don't make
Wait a
sense.
minute.
Right.
You know, it's like when you fly, you buy a ticket on an airplane, and then you get to the airport and they tell you they overbooked. So they got to bump you. I mean, that's what we are faced with right now.
Right. So let's get some answers to you.
But they don't have to answer that. What I want to know is the relief that we can get in the immediate.
The parking, so like, for instance, one thing you talked about was suspending street cleaning that allows for park. Another thing you talked about was adjusting how that parking is opened up, whether it is loading, unloading, permit, non-permit, like, so that's what you want to kind of have.
Yeah, I mean, because
All right,
you heard, they can't get deliveries.
right. Ian, do you understand that part of the?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
No, and again, I think we recognize that we coordinated the work zones, but we didn't take into consideration enough the impact on you all, the residents and the businesses. And again, that's why when we heard these complaints and concerns, we immediately shut down our site and immediately got a meeting with all the parties that are working along this corridor. And to make sure that, again, all of our work is in sync with each other. We're minimizing the impact during construction as much as possible. And then to your other one with the street sweeping, we did follow up with our sister agency to find DPW to find out if that was a possibility. And we're more than happy to let you know once we get an answer from them. We just got the email like yesterday, so we'll give them a few days.
So Ian, I guess, whether it is, the question that I think is posed to both the bus garage project, but also the DDOT around meeting with the businesses, because I think, and I'm just speaking because we've had, we've been trying to engage the community. I think they are looking for clarity or want to be able to discuss what they have as far as ideas around even Crittenden, Decatur, and the way parking is allowed to happen in the freed up spaces.
Yeah.
So where would that be able to happen?
Yeah. So for context, we are south of this. DC Plug is 1 block south. And so the parking that opened up is actually 2 blocks of parking, 2 blocks south of their work site. And for, what was the other part of the question? Sorry.
So like, I mean, and I'm gonna let you.
Here's were the things that I had asked for. One of the things that I've noticed, what I'm looking for is a relief from parking enforcement in that, because everybody that comes down there, they're parking right up on the stop sign. I've done it. So there's certain things that I think the city government can do. WMATA don't have no control over this. They got their own issues. But DC government does. They can offer us some relief in that regard.
Right.
On the north side of Crittenden Street, between the alley and 14th, there is a 2-hour parking limit for meters, not RPP, but for metered park. In other words, you can't be there more than 2 hours. I'd like that sign removed. I'd also like some consideration given to making Crittenden two-way temporarily.
Right, and I think I'm with you.
Okay.
But I also hear you saying that is the conversation that needs time to be unpacked.
And that's why I thought there would be another meeting. I wasn't really prepared
For this meeting.
to have detailed discussions about how because we can talk about this. I want some resolution.
Right, and
I wanted the resolution yesterday.
And it sounds like what's also important is that DDOT is a part of that meeting.
DDOT, DPW with their parking enforcement, DDOT controls like the signage. They can determine, and I'm talking about determining this without sending out a NOI or going through a lot of steps. Just do what you have to do to give these business people some relief.
Right, and I think, and I'm not speaking for you, Maya, but that's part of, like, it's not enough just to have DDOT at this meeting, but making sure that the right people are at the right meeting is what you're looking for. And that's what the commitment you're looking for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta have another meeting. I don't see, if we don't then the complaints are going to continue. And you don't have to take my word for it. Go down on that block,
All right.
10:30 in the morning, Highlands was empty. Smokies was empty. 10:30 in the morning, nobody was in there.
Right. I want to check in because I want to see other people having conversation. I want to see if somebody else wanted a question. Yes, thank you.
Have in this room is a number of business owners from Fort Worth.
Right.
So what Paladin is saying on his emails and here in this room, these guys are impacted. You've got Fortune Express, you've got Moon with his family, you've heard from Islands. Norm and I are both landlords on 14th Street as well as Paladin and Fortune Express. So hi, and Gabriella from the Uptown Main Street. So
I just need you to hold the mic so the people online
Sorry.
can.
So he's just not talking for himself. He's representing a lot of what we're going through. So this is having a significant impact on us. And what you could see after this project is a lot of empty stores, is what you can see, because businesses are being hit hard. And you stated that you guys went there and you met. Well, did you meet with some of the business owners? Did you talk to them? I think I saw, a blurb or two, maybe it was something Paladin had written, that you guys did stop in along the businesses. Okay, if you haven't, you need to. You've got to see what we're talking about. But I want to talk about the construction on 14th at Decatur, where that V is. That, where the cones are, that is being used for the parking of the construction crew. It is not impactful on the construction that's going on there. They're just using it to park. So the impact that that's having on folks coming across the park, making that left off of Decatur is significant, but not just for car traffic, for people traffic. You're talking about safe passage. We can't walk. I walk that corridor home every day, and it's dangerous because you're forcing us to go to Delafield to cross 14th. And DDOT has been at that corner a number of times, and it's dangerous. Cars whip around that corner. I'm walking there with my husband and 2 dogs, and one dog is 12 years old, and she can't run. But you've got to run when you're at that corner of Delafield. You need to put a stop sign there immediately. If not, you take those cars parking off of Decatur. They are doing nothing that, and maybe you guys can speak to that. They have no impact. That V has no impact on construction that's going on with the water service. It's just where these big trucks are parked while they're working. But the impact it has on us as business owners, because businesses or customers can park from Decatur to Delafield. If you remove those cones, and if they're only being used for parking for these construction guys, it's wrong. And DDOT, you should get out there and enforce that. If they put on their plan that that was to be used for equipment, there is like a Caterpillar there right now, but there's plenty of space for that Caterpillar to be moved closer in to Crittenden. They need to move those cones.
And Ms.
give us
Nwanza,
our
I just want to make sure everyone is following you. And hopefully, Emma, you can online do an arrow as well, or Alexis is here. Sorry, you're doing it. So, right, you're saying when they come down Decatur,
That V
they're
right where your
trying to make
hand
this
is.
left.
All those cones where they've blocked our parking from Decatur to Delafield. It's
I don't know
just
if you
being
could just show
used for
people online.
construction trucks. It's not being used for equipment at all. So DDOT, if you're coming, we want to meet with you because we want to talk about our personal experiences. And maybe some of the other businesses can speak to that as well. That will at least give us parking on both sides of 14 between Delafield and Decatur. And it's not being used now.
So I want to.
But we are all in support of meeting with WMATA and DDOT and DPW and the mayor's office and the council member's office, because all of you jokers need to be at the table, because this is painful for our corridor, painful. And if you've got this number of business owners in the room, it must hurt. So
During business
please,
hours.
During business hours, come on. So I've said my 2 cents.
Thank you. So, and I want
And sorry, I do want to thank Taladine, because without him out there, pushing for us, this wouldn't be on the table. And I would greatly appreciate if you don't limit us. I got cut off when the shorter community meeting, and this is an important issue that should be dealt with in its entirety. So thank you.
absolutely, thank you. So I think I want to make sure we leave with, one, the need for a follow-up meeting to really be able to unpack and discuss solutions around the parking and who should be there is also important. And really just ensuring that everyone appreciates the impact. Thank you. So, right, so all the modals of transportation. So way people walk, bike, as you talked about, individuals with disabilities, right. Yeah, so, but, and the need to talk about. Is there another question, Nina, were you going?
Donzo, can I just say
Yes.
one thing? So again, I appreciate that this is not going to make you feel better, but I want to be truthful with you and tell you what I can too. So the section that you're talking about, that taper there, that is part of DDOT's requirements as far as, because we're shifting the traffic, we have to have a taper of a certain distance to allow the cars to make that adjustment. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I want you to understand that that is a requirement, number one. But then number two is, as I mentioned, we're working our way from south to north. So we will very shortly be in that area, because the next thing we have to do is install a new manhole at that intersection to basically bisect the existing sewer line and divert the flow into our new line. So I'm not trying to say that makes you feel better, but I would rather tell you what's happening there so you understand it. And I appreciate what you said about Delafield too, because I think that's not something I can necessarily solve, but having Ian here and the DDOT team is something that, if they walk out there and we can see that, right, then that may be something they can help with. So thank you.
So I think, John, just because I think it's an organic question is, so that taper, which is required for the adjustment around maintenance of traffic, that goes away in 8 weeks or after the sewer?
Yeah, so at the end of the 8 weeks, basically everything that's there right now comes out, and then what is left is the remaining phase work, which, like I said, will only be done during the non-rush hours between 9:30 and 3:30. So that will be just like what we did already at the Crittenden intersection, where it will just be during those non-peak hours where we're putting cones and barrels out starting at 9:30, and then they come back down at 3:30, and everything is opened back up. And Mr. Ruch, I apologize. You said something earlier too about how many phases. So that was in the last slide, but I fully appreciate if I didn't speak to it specifically enough. So to address that, I believe what it is it's 2 phases that after we finish that main phase. And the reason that the range of the 1 to 3 weeks, not trying to be disingenuous, but the reason that we hedge a little bit on that is because we are crossing the street going perpendicular. And typically when that happens, you end up crossing a lot of existing utilities, which can slow it down considerably because you can no longer use heavy equipment. It has to be done by hand to make sure you aren't damaging those existing lines, which would create a much worse situation for everyone. So that was not meant to be deceptive. It's just meant to be realistic with you all, that is historically very hard to predict because you just don't always know exactly what you're going to find as you're crossing perpendicular to the road there.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and we will always, as always, have additional opportunity to ask questions.
Denzel, how much time do we have?
We have 10 minutes.
All right, thank you. I'll try and move through this quickly. The slides are next slide, please. So we're looking at this, the remediation of the site in 2 phases, an interim plan to deal with activities within the footprint of the bus garage, and then a final plan to deal with the entire site. We've identified 2 broad classes of contaminants: the petroleum compounds that were associated with operating the bus garage, and some chlorinated solvents that were used for dry cleaning purposes and maintenance materials. For the area within the footprint of the new bus garage, we've identified a number of remedial measures. Those include placing a vapor barrier and a soil vapor collection network underneath the foundation that Clark is placing right now. That's about 33% complete. Also within the footprint of the bus garage, we are installing 7 monitoring wells. Those activities are in progress. During the installation of those wells, we identified some additional contamination. We'd already gone through and removed the soil, tested it, classified it, and removed it from the site to an appropriate disposal facility. We'd gotten down to what we thought were clean levels, but in excavating the wells, we identified a couple more areas of petroleum contamination. We notified the Department of Energy and the Environment about this. We did some sampling, some rapid turnaround sampling, so that we knew what kind of contamination was present. It turned out to be petroleum in this case. In that area, we did some additional limited excavations. The soil was characterized based on the parameters that were set in the interim corrective action plan. That plan is available on site, online for folks to look at. We continue with the excavation of the interior monitoring wells. Slide, please. The lavender dots show the locations of the interior wells, and these are based on some of our previous identifications of areas of contamination, where the underground storage tanks were and where we'd identified contamination in the past. The idea then is this will give us a sense of any residual contamination that remains after the excavation of the soil. This residual contamination would be in the groundwater beneath the site. Slide, please. Once the interior wells are complete, then we will excavate a series of wells on the perimeter or outside of the footprint, and that will then give us a better understanding of any residual contamination in the groundwater. Once we get all of the wells installed, we'll collect a single round of samples. That information will be put into a risk assessment that will be used to establish the levels of risk associated with the contamination and set remediation levels. Depending on what we find, then we will install some pumps to remove residual contamination. That water will be treated before discharge. We'll do that under permits and in consultation with the Department of Energy and the Environment. We have, as part of our excavation work, we've added some materials that will help enhance the bioremediation of the residual contamination, and we're setting up to do some additional remediations depending on the results within the interior of the footprint. This is all being worked through with the DOEE. I know I'm going through this quickly, and I'm trying to get through to the point where we can ask questions. So we are continuing to work through on the remediation consistent with the interim cap and our discussions with DOEE. I'm going to put a pin in it, and I'm going to shift for a second so we can get to questions. Thank you. As many of you know, we are collecting data on air pollution. We're collecting data on noise and vibration. The monitoring reports for April, May, and June are posted online. We do continue to see noise exceedances above the project thresholds, but we see those during the work hours and after work hours, that is on evenings and weekends when we are not present. It's an ongoing challenge. We understand that. We have gotten some feedback in the past, and I'll be listening closely this evening on that. We had a couple of vibration detections that exceeded our thresholds. Based on our investigations, it looks like those are related to on-site workers bumping the vibration monitors, and then those are recorded accordingly. That's what we're seeing in the data. We did see in June a couple of exceedances of the particulates. Those were on days when there were some elevated wind levels. I would also share with you, many of you have seen over the past couple of days, there's been some haze in the air. That has been attributed by news media to some of the wildfires in Canada. So we are seeing that, and I went online today to look at some of the data instruments, and I'm seeing that in the data right now. We're seeing elevated concentrations, and it's coming likely from the Canadian wildfires. That's a lot of stuff. I did that real quickly to try to get through so we could get the questions. Donzel.
Yeah, 2 slides. Who's running the slides over there? You have a clicker? You're not, I'm trying to do a mouse. Is there a pointer on the clicker? A red dot pointer? Oh, but it's not online, though. Because I need the people, I'm sorry, can you go back 2 slides? One more, right there. Because I wanted to get back to your question, and I wanted to make sure you had an answer. Because the church is here, right? No. Oh, I'm in the wrong place? Arkansas. On the other side. Okay.
Donzel, it's, on this one, it's above the intersection of Iowa and Arkansas, and it's, yeah.
Okay, I can't see it. But, and the reason I'm asking Jim, because to her question, I think you've talked about in previous, the flow of the contour of the land, which way it goes, because I want to make sure she gets a modicum of an answer around the kids' farm in the back of the church, which is one of the kind of figure out what's the risk there, right? So I wondered if you can speak to, and people online, I apologize, you can't see where I'm pointing because whoever has the mouse is not doing it. All right, but the northernmost, for those there, the northernmost part of this image is where the church is located. Jim, could you talk about the contour a little bit?
Absolutely. Okay. So there are 2 different flow patterns that you need we need to pay attention to. The first is the groundwater flow direction. And on this site, groundwater flows to the southeast, which means from the center of the site toward the intersection of Buchanan and Arkansas northwest. That's why you see that line of perimeter wells located along Arkansas and along Buchanan. We're trying to identify groundwater contamination that's flowing from the site. Petroleum will flow across the top of the groundwater surface because it's lighter than water. Chlorinated solvents are more dense than water, and so what they will do is they will sink to the bottom of the groundwater aquifer and then flow along the bottom of the groundwater aquifer. That surface also tilts towards Arkansas and Buchanan, and that's why you're seeing that those 2 lines of wells along Arkansas and Buchanan. We're trying to identify if there's any contamination leaving the site, and if so, how much.
So what I think you're saying, Jim, is the way that it would flow would be away from the church, and that's why the wells start here and end down here, because that's the flow pattern. So I hope does that get you a better answer around the impact of the site on the farm?
Should we still test the soil?
Could you restate the question, please? I'm having.
She wanted to know if she should still test the soil.
I haven't identified any sources of contamination from the site that would be on that property. The groundwater seems to be moving to the southeast, away from the site of the former bus garage.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions around? I know Mr. Bridgewater and Ms. Nwanza. Hold on, we'll keep waiting for the mic just so that.
There used to be a neighborhood group, an environmental group, that met with WMATA on a regular basis. Does that still happen?
Maybe, but I'm not aware of it.
Was that Russ Clark? No?
I've talked with Mr. Clark, but not about this.
Okay, that doesn't exist anymore. Okay. In terms of, it sounds like soil monitoring will continue, but what about air monitoring? Once this project is complete, will we still be monitored?
So the air monitoring that we're doing today is for dust particulates. Once Clark has that lower level of concrete completely in place. The potential for soil, it already has been greatly reduced because essentially that lower level is covered up. But there should be no soil coming from the site on a regular basis. That said, one of the things that we're doing, and this is built into the interim corrective action plan, is we will have a PVC network of pipes beneath the concrete foundation with some stub-ups through the concrete foundation. The idea is that after we get the bus garage built, we'll go in and collect some air samples from that, and that will give us an indication of what kind of residual contamination is below the concrete but above the groundwater. If it's above a certain level, then we're going to put in vacuums in there, pull that air out, run it through some carbon filtration systems before we exhaust it into the air. And this will be done in conjunction with discussions with DOEE so that they know what's going on. But we're putting those measures in place right now so that we're prepared to deal with that potential consequence. It's sort of related to LEED, but it does contribute to that because we're supposed to reuse brownfield sites, but we're doing this outside of the LEED work.
So just for those online, the question was, did it impact the LEED certification? And it's outside of the work is what you said.
So one of the elements of LEED is you have to, they encourage the use of brownfield sites, and this would be considered a brownfield site.
Mr. Bridgewater?
So you just said this is a brownfield site?
Yes, sir.
We've been saying that for a long time now. Hurricane Talib just hit land. There's another storm out in the Gulf of Mexico called Hurricane Ray, and Hurricane Ray is much worse than Hurricane Talib. I'm telling you that right now. There needs to be another meeting to deal with the environmental situation. Now you're talking about Petrum, you're talking about contaminated water. This is the first time I heard the word contamination. The DOE guy fussed with me about saying, there's no contamination, there's no contamination. And we all know that's a lie, but he kept trying to say that there was no contamination. Now you're talking about contamination. Now you mentioned the B word. We've all known that. This has been going on for several decades. We all know that. Come on. We're not stupid. We're not stupid. So you've had a situation, the situation with People Church didn't start last year or the year before or a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Now you're just realizing that petrol in the soil. So that means that there were pipes that were bursting. And you're not acknowledging that. Now you're being forced to acknowledge. Now you say the B word, brownfield. It is a brownfield. It's been a brownfield for almost close to 50 years. It's been a brownfield. And you know what a brownfield is? Tell me give me the definition of a brownfield.
So, and I don't get the definition, but I also want to know if there was because I know, like you said, we need to meet again to discuss the environmental elements. I know you framed it as what happened to the group that Mr. Uchter said was a part of the council member, but there may be a need to focus again on that. So Jim, as you talk about a brownfield, we can also kind of touch on when we've talked about the chlorinated solvents as well.
Sure. First off, we've been in discussions with DOEE for about 3 years on this particular aspect, and WMATA has been working with DOEE on contamination at this site for even longer than that. I don't have the perception that this is a new issue. I appreciate your concern. I'm concerned about it as well. Generally, when you're looking at site development, the use of reusing existing sites is considered better than using a greenfield site, a site that has not had any activity on it in the past. We have the opportunity to go in and remediate the site, and this is a once in a 100-year opportunity, and we are taking full advantage of that. Anytime we do find contamination, we reach out to our folks at DOEE to talk about what we found. In the case that came up most recently, this was the soil, contaminated soil that was identified after we had done the soil excavation at the site. We identified some additional contaminated soil. We reported it immediately to DOEE. We did some rapid turnaround testing so that we understood what we were dealing with, because we understood that it needed to be removed from the site. And once you do that, it has to be sent to the appropriate facility. We are working to do this in compliance with all of the rules in a way that's protective of the environment.
Okay. We're going to get back to your definition of a brownfield, but you just said something. So how recent is this problem that you just discovered?
We identified it about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
3 weeks
I'm
ago.
looking at, yeah, but within 48 hours, I was on the phone to, less than that, within 24 hours, I was on the phone with DOEE, identifying that we had found it and telling them what we were going to do about it. I don't know how long it had been in place, though, sir.
And that's the reason why we have to have another meeting. Because you just recently found something. That's why the question is being asked by the lady who's just now getting ready to leave. That's why the question has been asked. They're asking about a garden where they're growing different type of vegetarian or vegetable type of item. That's why they're asking that question. And you're talking about something that just happened, 3 weeks ago. Where did that come from? How did it get there? Those are the things that means that you've been digging for how much? Close to a year and a half. Now you've been digging, and you still got problems? You still got problems? That means you haven't been solving the problem. And you say this is 100 years, you're taking advantage. I've been here for 65 years. We've been taken advantage of. We have been taken advantage of.
So, Mr. Bridgewater, I appreciate it. Let me ask you, what would effective communication look like for around the environmental pieces? Like when you say more meetings, more communicating with the community, keeping them informed, how would you what would that look like? Should it be periodic, like bi-weekly, monthly updates, like in addition to the newsletter? What would be, how do we solve, making sure we communicate effectively with the community?
Well, we just found out about something that happened 3 weeks ago. So we got a problem. I would say at least a monthly meeting and reports that come out once you find that there's a problem. A report that goes to people's church and everybody else south of the border of Arkansas. So, because you're talking about if it's affecting people's church, then that's across the street from the bus barn.
Right.
And God knows how far it goes beyond that.
So what would we
So you're talking about radon. You're talking about all type of other gastric problems that may be existing. You're not even addressing the aspect of cancer. You're not addressing the aspects of cancer.
So it sounds like, Mr. Bridgewater, is since we know the way it flows, where it's going, at least keep, everyone should be kept informed, consistent. Even if they're saying at a month period, we haven't discovered anything new, let's be on the record around what's going on with the soil and potential contamination. that accurate?
Yes. There needs to be a meeting. Yes, it needs to be with everyone as much as possible. Quick question before I go back to the definition of a brownfield. Have there been any conversations with the Ethiopian church?
I have not met with them personally. I'm not sure if anyone else has.
Isn't that the People's Church? Oh, no, it's
No, no,
No,
no.
that's People's Church is up top. Which one had the door? That's the People's, okay.
There's been no conversation with
Not since
the
early on.
Ethiopian church?
No, the gentleman was actually in the meeting. Yeah, he came to the meeting,
He came to what meeting?
to one of the quarterly meetings. The gentleman the pastor of the church came to the meeting. So
We're not, he came here to a meeting after he was told there was a meeting. I'm talking about all this time, have there been a conversation with the Ethiopian church?
So the reason I'm answering that, Mr. Bridgewater, because I'm responsible for communicating. I can tell you at the very beginning of the project, we've talked to him. We've invited him to the meetings, and he's attended. So to answer your question,
You invited
I apologize if I don't remember his name. The members of the Ethiopian church. I will get the name for you because I know I own that part of it, and I'll take accountability. So I know that we've spoken to the church, they've been here, and we reach out to all the stakeholders on a regular basis. So we've even tried to call you, like that part, I'm confident about.
You've been talking with the Ethiopian
That I have
church
reached-
all this time?
Yes, sir. Now that part I am very confident about.
Okay, well, I'll talk with the
Please
the
do.
church
Now that part I
of
stand
the
on.
people, because they're acting like
They don't know anything?
they don't know.
Okay. Well,
So
yeah.
that's a problem. Now, back to your definition of a brownfield.
So Mr. Bridgewater, if I can pause for a second, I'm gonna let you hold the mic, because I want to honor our time. I want to run through the next steps, and then we can come back to because we have another Q&A part. But I want to get through, for those who can't stay beyond the time, I want to get to that final piece with Tom, and then I'm gonna get right back. You don't even have to let the mic go yet. So Tom, if you can go ahead and do the next slide.
All right, sorry about that. Next slide. I'd like to just say we're tracking on schedule for May of 2027 completion. We do have one more major design element to tend with. As John indicated earlier, we're progressing on the battery electric bus design, approaching the 90% completion. That will inform us what impacts to the remaining schedule may be. We are looking for every opportunity to mitigate any delays or impacts to the project with the BEB design and that completion effort. Next slide. Community engagement, WMATA is trying to be active, obviously with the regular meetings and what have you. Some other events we've had recently, encourage you to participate and reach out with us in different forums. Next slide. Those are some past and then some upcoming. I think one is just passed on this slide, but the next one is August 17th out at Fort Totten for a school event, free supplies and some other giveaways, some entertainment for the kids and families getting ready for school. Next slide. We're out there. We can be contacted, various mechanisms. I think if you're here at the meeting, you're registered to the website. That has good updates, regular updates on various information with the project and upcoming events. So we encourage the participation and look forward to it in the future. Next slide.
There we go. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. I appreciate you allowing us to just get that out of the way. So now I know you wanted to talk about brownfield. That is, I know people want to listen, but that kind of concludes our presentation piece. So I wanted to make sure you had time to have the questions until we have to get the pack up for the library. There you go.
I'd like to make 3 points because to respond to some of the stuff some of the questions you've offered. First, we have already done sampling across Arkansas from the site. We identified one small area of petroleum contamination up near the intersection of Arkansas and Iowa. After we had done that, and we spoke with DOEE, they came back to us and said, we still want these perimeter wells on the site. And if you could go to the slide with those perimeter wells. So we've already looked across Arkansas and did not we identified one area of contamination. We don't know what's between that area across Arkansas and these perimeter wells, but we're going to find out. You ask about cancer and whether we considered that. What's going to happen after we get the wells on the inside of the site, plus the perimeter wells installed, is we'll go through and collect or water samples from those locations. They will be analyzed for both organic compounds and inorganic analytes, metals. Those data will be put into what's called a baseline risk assessment to establish the risks that's associated with this site. Risk is typically looked at through two filters. One is through cancer-causing contaminants, and the other is through non-cancer-causing contaminants. There are two different filters. And based on the numbers that come out of that, then we will establish the remediation levels for the site so that we ensure that the contaminated water that might be present under the site doesn't leave the site, that it gets pulled out of the ground and remediated, and the whole site gets remediated. Then the final thing, and I'll pause. In the usage that I'm familiar with, and I know there are many definitions, but the usage that I'm familiar with, a greenfield is a site that's never had any activity on it before, even farming. Then a brownfield is a site where there's been activity on it in the past. LEED typically encourages the redevelopment of sites, and in this case, not only are we redeveloping the site, but we're going through the remediation exercises as well. I recognize there are a lot of questions in that, and I look forward to answering them.
There needs to be continuing meetings with the community in the region. We have a large, it's not just cancer, but cancer is very big in the Ward 4 area. It's very big in other parts of the city for logical reasons. But the bus barn is something special. Just like the trash transfers in Ward 5 is very special. Just like the highway in Ward 7 and 8 that runs through is very special because it presents a lot of problems. So it's cancer, but we're talking about pregnant women. Okay, when you talk about air quality, you're talking about a woman who's breathing for two people. We don't take that into consideration. Nobody never mentioned anything about pregnant women. Okay?
So I apologize.
This city had just been awarded a grant. Only 2 cities in this entire country has been awarded a grant for triple negative breast cancer, and why it's a problem in this area. And we got to look at traffic, we got to look at soil, we got to look at air quality, we have to look at water quality. You have to look at those things to start understanding why triple negative breast cancer, which is the most devastating type of breast cancer a woman can have, and men have breast cancer too. So that's a long task. That's a long task, especially with diesel fuel buses. That's going to be a long task and a long, complicated task because those buses run all around the city.
I know, Mr. Bridgewater, you always feel like I'm trying to cut you off, and I'm not. I want to make sure this conversation gets what it deserves. So, Jim, I want to, if I can, set up an opportunity to unpack some of the information from how long we've been looking, how long the team has been looking at the site. You know, I want to set that up. Mr. Bridgewater, I know we reached out outside of the meeting. I want to continue to try to set that up with you. So if we can, you know, if I call, hopefully you'll answer or give me a text back, because I think you're right. It deserves more than 3 minutes of conversation, and I want to be able to set that up, if you allow me. So, you know, Nina is the one that does most of our scheduling. I can promise you tomorrow we'll begin the conversation on trying to figure out when do we have that conversation. And of course, you know, we'll make sure others are a part of it. Mr. Wanza, hold on, if you can wait for the mic for me.
Just a quick comment. One of the things that WMATA can do to help the business community is on the back of the buses, they have a community space that they use for advertising. And it's free to some nonprofits, I think. We would like to have use of that space. And if Main Street could kind of coordinate that with WMATA to create something to put on the back of the buses, I think that's the least WMATA can do for a business community that's hurting like ours. If you could talk to them and get back to us in the next day or so, so that we can get that moving.
Thank you, because I was going to say I can't give you an answer, but I commit to following up to get an answer.
Very soon.
Yes,
Now,
ma'am.
I don't want this conversation to get pushed, and we're in week 7
I understand.
of an 8-week.
Thank you for that, and I will follow up on it.
Just real quick, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. As we are talking about planning these meetings, and this is not designed to let WMATA off the hook, but the real culprit here is the failure of our city government to respond to the community. You shouldn't be talking to Jim. DOEE needs to be here. They need to have meetings with us. I don't, technically, and I mentioned this to DDOT earlier, you all got to understand, DC government doesn't have any authority over WMATA. The only entity that has authority over WMATA is the Congress of the United States. And we don't have a senator, and we don't have a state representative, so we don't have no authority. DDOT can't tell them what to do. They are an authority. Just like DC WASA, they're an authority. DC government can't tell them what to do. But our city government has a responsibility to see to it that we are made whole. So, last comment, I'm going to suggest, when did the sewer line project start? July the 26th? What I'm going to suggest to all of my business people and those that aren't here, what I want them to do is to start pulling together some financial statements from January the 1st until July the 26th. And then I want to see your receipts 2-3 months from now. Because if you're talking about compensation, we need to know how much money you've actually lost. And when we have this meeting for the business people, I want Charles Allen there and all of the members of the committee that have oversight over WMATA. I'm going to see if I can get a couple of people from WMATA's board to show up. Because they can't do anything, and I don't mean to be disparaging against y'all, but I know you're limited in what you can do and what you can say. The board is the one that has the authority. The general manager is the one that has the authority. They can tell them what to do. If we want them to work on weekends, Saturday and Sunday, they can do that. They can't do it. You know, they can't make that decision. But they can work. In fact, I did the math. If they were to, this project that they're talking about is 8 weeks. If they were to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then Saturday and Sunday, they could get this done in 4 weeks. But of course, that's at a cost. And now you're talking about a change order. And the only one that's going to work out, you know, is going to benefit from that is going to be Clark.
Right.
So anyway.
All right. No. So thank you for participating. Like I said, we got work to do to kind of continue. What we are committed to do, I think, you know, and we put in the chat, please fill out your evaluations, because we want to make sure we get the honest feedback from the community, both online and here. And we will be following up, you know, just to at least give answers around next steps. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your comments. Thank you.